listen to the recording later. But anyway, we're recording it, and I'll send the link to the recording and then the slides that Christian's going to use in the discussion to everybody as a follow-up. So if you miss something, you don't have to take notes. You'll get the recording and the slides. Um, and then feel free to ask questions, you guys. Put them in chat. I'll take a look at the chat. I'll monitor the chat. Sean's going to help me do that too, and Christian and Matthias will as well. And then just a little bit about ESA, you guys, before we get started. We've partnered with ADP for the past 10 years to build this executive community, and we're global, and we have about 3,000 participants in the community. And thanks to ADP, they've helped me do that. We deliver world-class thought leadership. Christian Gomez is one of those today, and exposure to innovative startup technologies. And I see Marilyn Pearson Hendricks, and she's my partner in crime to do that. Um, and you guys, we're unique in that we bring CIOs, CHROs, COOs, CEOs together because we believe that everyone has to be involved in the employee value proposition these days. We also, for anybody that doesn't know that, I see a lot of people that are in our program. We do have a board positioning membership that provides many of the resources that an executive needs to be able to navigate to a paid board position. And if you're interested at all in being on a paid board, check it out on our website. Join us. So today, as I mentioned, I'm honored to have Christian Gomez with us again. He's been a thought leader for us. He's a thought leader. He leads the ADP Research Institute and has long been a protege of Marcus Bo. Um, he is an expert in talent and is quickly becoming an expert and thought leader in how business leaders use AI to get the most out of human value from their talent. And he is becoming a thought leader in his own right around this kind of topic. Joining him today, I'm so excited to have Matthias. Matthias is the CHRO of Donata, which is a, a division of Emirates. And they have like 110,000 employees around the world. I think Donata in the US has 55,000. You're going to love the fact that Matthias is going to share a lot of the real live technical AI things that they're doing within their company. And I love the fact that he's done that research, talked to the CIO, and he's going to share that with you guys today. So with that, Christian, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can do a more proper introduction of yourself and Matthias, and then I'm going to back out for a while, okay?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Cindy. A very, very gracious introduction. And by way of that introduction, so my role at ADP, I actually lead a consulting practice inside of ADP that partners with the Research Institute. And we have a practice filled with, honestly speaking, some of the most talented people that I've ever had the privilege of working with that have been brought out of the finance, IT, and HR backgrounds. They are leaders in their own right. They've worked for multinational organizations. Some of them just have tremendous background in each of those fields, and particularly their mandate is to stay up to date on the concerns, the challenges, and the opportunities that the HR, IT, and finance functions are having right now as they support organizations to manage what's going on now. A big part of my mandate, and Cindy, you rightfully alluded to that, is to work closely with the Research Institute. And as you know, or you may know, ADP is one of the biggest HCM companies in the world. They provide products, they provide services. They've been around for 75 years. They're really an institution. But what isn't as readily known or recognized is the fact that they're sitting on the biggest repository of data on people in the world. They have over 1.2 million organizations that manage a part of their HCM cycle with them. And a very long time ago, they invested in understanding the insights that could be derived from that data. And that's kind of the mandate and the mission of the Institute. And I do partner with them and I do take a lot of their insights. And then my job specifically is to engage with the C-suite of the companies that either are clients of ADP or partner with ADP in some capacity, and to be able to take some of these research-driven insights and help them incorporate them into their strategies in a product agnostic way. It doesn't matter which ADP product they use, or in some instances, it doesn't even matter if it's an ADP product that we're touching. It's really something designed to kind of elevate the value of the partnership that we have. So if you can imagine in my work, I have the privilege of doing this for a living, going to these organizations and learning as much as I can about them, their industries, their challenges, and their opportunities, and then being able to bring forward any insight that I can deliver to help them be able to incorporate into what matters most right now. Now, it'll come as no surprise that as I'm doing that, there's one topic that keeps gravitating to the surface. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, what aspect of human capital performance or financial materiality, the conversation always shifts to what about AI? Where does AI fit into this? So what I thought we would do today is first and foremost, I'll introduce Matthias more formally when we engage him in the conversation. But what I'd like to do is set the stage for that conversation and do so in as honest and transparent way as I can. One of the things that I hear the most, particularly from senior HR leaders, is we want to know what's real because it's becoming harder and harder to differentiate between what's aspirational or what might commonly be referred to as hype and what is material and what's real and what's actually being done now. So I can bring a little bit of insight, kind of gathering a little bit of the insights that I've had as I go from company to company, industry to industry, executive team to executive team to kind of give you my insights in terms of what stands out. And then what I'm really excited about with Matthias is that in conversations with him, he not only has the disposition to share with us materially what he's doing and the impact that it's having on his function and the business that he supports, but also will be able to go into some very good levels of specificity around what that looks like from a use case perspective, which is one of the things that I know people in your position really want to look at. I want to know what's actually being done. I want to know the impact that it's actually having, and I want to know how that fits into the broader strategy. So without further ado, I'll share a couple of slides up front to set the context in terms of what am I seeing? How does that align with this conversation? And then we'll break out and we'll have a nice fireside chat with Matthias. And then what I would like to also do is as I'm speaking and as we're collecting information, I would love to see you engaged as well. So if you want to put a question in the chat, Cindy's going to help me be able to incorporate them into my conversation with Matthias, or maybe we just have a direct conversation towards the end of the session. All right. So let's go ahead and jump right in. And if somebody could just give me a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. So the conversation itself is like, how are we, from a senior leadership perspective, maybe coming at this from a finance perspective or an HR perspective or an IT perspective? What is the challenge and the opportunity in front of us right now as it relates to how we optimize the workforce in the age of AI? And the first thing that I think is important to acknowledge is the big question is this hype or not? The more, if you go to any conference, it's basically now it's kind of like the drinking game. How often are people going to say AI and how relevant is it? Is it really as transformative and all consuming as it feels? And the reality of that question is that fortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it actually is. It is that important. It is absolutely not something that we can ignore. It is something that we absolutely have to address, but there is a counter to it as well. There is a lot of aspirational things that are being unpacked that are not in line with what is being materially done inside of organizations. And that's something that I'd like to kind of touch on here. But the reality is that all of us, regardless of whether we're on an executive team, an HR executive team, or we're informing executive teams, we have to be able to tie this into the support that we give. So as we start to look at it, I want to start to think about why. Why is this so important? And why is this indeed valid? The first thing that we have to acknowledge is the economic pressure that just about every organization and every industry is under right now. And a bunch of things are basically converging. The first one is a culture of business for the last 20 to 30 years where we have continuously demanded growth quarter after quarter, year after year of every business in every single industry. It gets to a certain point, and this point happens to be the present that we're living in right now, where the ability to be able to increase margins and financially engineer organizations can only allow you to do so much. So now as we're getting to this place, every single one of you and everybody that you either support or partner with is being asked to do significantly more with significantly less. Now, that, as I said, is converging with significant, rapid technological innovation. And to summarize it, or to make it very bluntly, what used to be impossible is very quickly becoming possible, which creates a sense of urgency of understanding how does that inform our capability, our strategy, and our ability to be able to serve our organizations and our shareholders. And then finally, it's the area that I've been living in for the last 15 years, and it's the evolution of our understanding of the human condition at work and understanding what we can do to be able to impact things like discretionary effort. How, at the end of the day, when you look at least the United States GDP, 84% of that economy is driven by service functions. That means that humans are in the loop, and humans, as it relates to discretionary effort, will be able to determine the output and the value that they create. As we become smarter in that, it changes the dynamics inside of organizations, and it changes our roles as leaders inside of those organizations. So, what I've come to the conclusion of, again, after doing this entire tour, if you will, with business leaders, I did do a very deep dive into the IT function itself, what's being asked of CIOs, and how are they being able to manage all of these demands and expectations. And I came to one conclusion, and that's that the opportunity or the challenge that's in front of us is not necessarily a technological one, it's more so of a leadership one. Technology is going to scale our capability, but leadership is going to determine an organization's capacity and ability to be able to harness that potential and turn it into something material that has an impact on not just the outcomes that our businesses create, but how our people create those outcomes. So, what is it that's happening, and why? What am I noticing as it relates to this leadership dynamic? And again, I recognize how privileged I am to be able to have a lot of these confidential, transparent conversations behind closed doors with some of these individuals that lead some of the largest organizations that are being cited in a lot of the work that we see in media and business press. And here's what I'm finding. What I'm finding is that the way that our leadership teams were structured for the last 50 years have served us well, but they're actually becoming a bit of a filter for what's required next. And what I found is basically that in order for an organization, from a leadership perspective, to be able to be a proper steward of what the organization needs to do as it evolves, it needs to be able to rely on the entirety of an executive team. Because what we're finding is that even though every member collectively has all the pieces of the puzzle, they each have very big blind spots. And I'm just going to unpack them really quickly. So when we look at HR, the focus of HR has always been on managing and optimizing an organization's human capital. The blind spot there, though, however, is that we don't always have visibility into the actual work, how it gets done, and more importantly, the advances in technology and how those could impact it. When I talk to a lot of standalone HR executive teams, they're very focused on the HR processes that they maintain, but they're not as connected to the business and how the business is executing on those processes. And then, just as importantly, they're really struggling to understand how these advances in technology could impact their downstream strategies and the way that they impact employees and potential customers. When we look at the IT function, the traditional focus has been on systems integration and the deployment of technology. Where they have been missing a little bit of that is because their focus has been so much on adoption that a lot of times they have not have the full picture around the enablement of an actual business strategy. And I'll go into a little bit more detail because I do want to go into more detail into the changing expectations for the HR and the IT function. From an operational perspective, all our operational leaders, their focus is on efficiency and execution. And the blind spot that we see there is that a lot of times they are so focused on the present state that it's really hard for them innately or in isolation to be able to envision what the future can and should look like, taking advantage of all of the innovation that we just talked about earlier. And then finally, we have the finance function that focuses on financial discipline, efficiency, and protecting shareholder value. The blind spot there is that as it relates to human capital, even though it's the biggest expense and the biggest value generator, it's typically not looked at as a growth lever. And that's something that, in order for us to be able to harness the potential of the opportunity that's in front of us right now, needs to be able to come together. So we'll revisit this later, but if you look at this at the collective, it could be daunting, but at the same time, it should be incredibly encouraging because whatever blind spots we might see in general terms for each of these functions, they each have the missing piece of the puzzle for each other. So when we look at prescriptions on what good looks like, we'll go ahead and revisit that dynamic. But I wanted to unpack, as I said, the HR and the IT function. Because what I realized was that it's incredibly fascinating, the evolution of these functions and the expectations that are placed on both of them. So when you look at the IT function, I'm sorry, the HR function, it's the main focus traditionally going back 50 years has been managing compliance and mitigating risk. I need to make sure people are paid on time, taxes are filed, all of the internal processes are working, and that you can step in case there's any risk to the organization. That has been great, and it has served our this discipline very well. But as all of this innovation is coming, now they're being looked at as an innovation hub. What can you do to inform our business strategy so that human capital performance can give us those business lifts that we frankly need, given all the context that we shared earlier? From an IT perspective, the focus has always been on understanding how to deploy tools. How do we identify the right tools that the organization needs? How do we procure them? How do we deploy them? And then how do we make sure people adopt them? That has always been the mandate of IT. And again, for the most part, they've done a phenomenal job at it. But all of a sudden, with the advent of AI, they're actually being asked to do something that is significantly greater than that. And that's defining the business impact that technology must achieve, which again, just like with HR, these are great opportunities, but they're very different from what was traditionally expected of that function. And in a lot of conversations, a lot of backroom roundtables that I've been a part of, I've heard a lot of CIOs say, I built an entire career out of being a ticket manager, and now I'm being asked to be a key business strategist. And that's a great thing, but it is very different from what we've traditionally done, and we need to reshape our functions in order to be able to deliver on that demand. Now, if you take a moment and you pause and you refer back to what I said earlier, to me, the big aha was these two functions need to be intrinsically connected, aligned, and drive each other forward. Now, how do we do that? The first thing is another thing that I've noticed that was not and is not commonly being put into practice inside of an HCM strategy, either from an IT perspective or from an HR perspective. And that is ensuring that every investment made in a human capital management strategy is connected. It has a linkage back to the financial impact that it's having. And this is something that ideally you do as you're developing a program or developing an initiative, you're requesting funding, but it could also be done retroactively. And what that basically entails is creating that linkage that ties recruiting or an onboarding program with the tools and all of the investments that they require, but aligning it with the impact that it has on business operations, the impact that it has on customer facing functions. And by aligning, I don't mean theoretically in a spreadsheet, but ideally being able to do so on a balance sheet, being able to track, here's what we did, here's how it impacted the operations of our people, here's the impact it has on our customer, and then here's how we're reflecting that in a financial way. This is a deep conversation that we can go in another setting into. But the beauty of it is that a lot of the advances that are coming through AI and a lot of the emerging technologies are actually making it much more possible for us to put these systems in place. So when we think about the innovation of AI, we typically think about LLMs and we think about all of these other fantastic things that AI is capable of doing. One of the things that we haven't been putting in much emphasis on is the ability for it to do the unsexy stuff, the stuff that happens behind the scenes but makes everything else work. And one of the things that we're starting to see is the ability to be able to connect disparate systems and be able to connect or create a financial narrative. Here is the human capital performance story of a particular job function, of a particular job, or a particular initiative. When we're able to do that, my belief is that we're going to be able to change the current paradigm. This is the bottom line of what I'm hearing and seeing as it relates to the business conversation around AI. There is a tremendous amount of money and resources being invested in AI, and very few organizations are able to tangibly, materially demonstrate a business impact that it's having. That's okay because we're at early stages, but what I just described earlier is to me the key to be able to unlock that. And what makes me even more excited is the fact that HR is going to be at the center of that conversation. So now what I would look at anybody that's in or around the HR function is elevating their expectations and their strategy in terms of what they can deliver. Because what we've materially been able to find with every single one of these organizations is that the greatest pathway to the ROI of AI is not in the technology, it is in the deployment of that technology to increase human capital performance. So I'll bring us home now and tee up the conversation, but I'm going to share with you a matrix that we created to help HR be able to identify how do we align ourselves with not just the IT function, but the business function to help them identify where the areas of greatest ROI recognition lie. Doesn't mean that that's potentially the greatest area for ROI, but where can I materially capture it? And that all of a sudden increases the relevance of the HR function, and more importantly, brings them and puts them at the center stage of the AI enterprise strategy. So, what this optimization matrix looks like, and we've done this with many different organizations, is you start by looking at what I refer to as Pareto's principle. So with almost every industry and every organization that I've studied, I haven't found any exceptions, but I don't want to assume that there aren't any out there. Approximately 20% of your jobs, of your people, are materially directly contributing to 80% of your financial performance. It doesn't mean that the 80% that support them are not also materially important, but when we're talking about demonstrating materiality, we're talking about which ones are most closely connected and who can we draw a direct line between what they're doing and the impact that it's having. So we'll typically go and start with an executive team and ask them to unpack their key KPIs. What are the business metrics that your shareholders and your board questions the most? Which are the most important to your success? Once you unpack them, you categorize them. And I'll give you an example. I work with a large retail organization, and when they unpack their business impact metrics, they landed on quality and customer experience. We're the ones that were driving their brand. The products that they produce and the experience that their customers have with them in their stores or online are where ultimately drives their most important business metrics. So then we went back with HR and we identified all of the jobs that we can directly connect to creating those outcomes. And then that's when this matrix comes into play. You start to map those jobs inside of this matrix. And what you start to find is that when you have a high level of effort or complexity involved, but it is yielding little material value to the organization, meaning I cannot draw a direct correlation. I use the example, for example, of payroll. Payroll is something that we traditionally would outsource because it is very complex, it is very difficult, but from a business perspective, I cannot connect it to the key business metrics of the organization. So when you look at the next segment would be the ones that require low effort but yield value. I'm sorry, low effort and yield very little value. The example I use a lot would be, for example, the person that checks you in into an office sometimes. I'm seeing a lot of iPads, a lot of systems that leverage facial recognition and so forth to be able to let people in and out and manage access. That's something that doesn't necessarily require a ton of effort, and it's very difficult to capture value. So from an HR perspective, we want to be on the right-hand side of this conversation. And when you start to look at low effort and high value, that is good, but the greatest opportunity to capture ROI is going to live in that top right quadrant. What are the roles that require significant effort, have significant complexity, and we can tangibly measure high material value back to the business of the business metrics of the organization? If you think about it, that is where AI has the biggest promise, because if we're going to simplify what AI is, it is a technological innovation that allows humans to manage more complexity than they would be able to do on their own. So if we can now deploy it against these jobs, this is where HR can align with IT and finance and operations in order to be able to drive these outcomes. So that's really what I wanted to be able to do to kind of tee up my conversation or our conversation with Matthias, but I'll just summarize it. And it's first and foremost, every executive team that I've talked to needs to start with alignment. The technology is not what you should be focused on because the technology will be continuously evolving, and a technology without the alignment that we described and the coordination you're not going to invest it in the right places, and you're not going to be able to coordinate and measure the right results. The next thing is a hyper focus on data and ethics. If you don't have a stable foundation as it relates to how we're collecting data and what is our ethical framework to manage AI, you are committing malpractice on behalf of your organization, because then when you do start to deploy a lot of this technology, there's just too much that can go wrong and you're not setting it up for success. When organizations are asking me, am I behind? That's usually the one thing that I point them to. If you have not solidified this aspect of it, then you are. If you have, then now is when you can start to innovate. but keeping in mind that fast is not the goal. I mean, right now there's so many organizations that number one have been punished for moving too fast and now facing class action lawsuits, brand reputational loss. And there's a lot of organizations that are being rewarded in this moment in time for taking the slow and steady approach. And then finally, this to me is materially important. It's beginning with the business impact. Do not start with an HCM strategy. Start with the business impact that the organization values the most, and then back it in to your human capital performance strategy, and then back it into the right tools and solutions. But again, it all comes together through that sense of shared ownership. Okay, I apologize if I talk too fast. I wanted to get that context out, and then I want to now bring Matthias onto the stage and invite him to kind of have this conversation with us collectively. So as I mentioned earlier, though, I do want you to be a part of the conversation as well. So please submit questions and bring this out. I'm going to make this question of Matthias, but I'd love for all of you to answer that as well. As it relates to the evolving expectations and demands being placed on the HR function, Matthias, does this align with what you're seeing? And in doing so, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, tell us a little bit more about your organization, and tell us a little bit more about your role?
Very good. Maybe thank you for being part of this fire chat, if you will. Glad to be part of the team and community. Many of the names, and you guys are familiar with me. But Matthias Piotrowicz, I'm a VP of People Strategy here at Denata. Denata is and I'm going to unpack it a little bit. It's a Dubai National Air Transport Association. So in 1959, this company came into existence. Today, this is part of the Emirates Group. We're operating in about more than 30 countries across the globe, and we're one of the largest air service providers. In the United States, we have about almost 4,000 employees, but globally about 55,000 employees. We basically are providing all the services related to air transport, and they're divided into different groups. Group handling, which is the largest segment in our organization, cargo and logistics, catering and retail, as well as travel. All of it, what I just said, concerns people, right? People are really the core of our business, not as much machinery as people. So it's very important to know how to apply the new AI tools, and that's how the conversation with Christian started. I've been in the HR role for the last 25 years. Initially through the Siemens Energy, worked for Siemens Energy for over 20 years. Last 10 years I spent in Houston working for the company called Ethos Energy, which was a joint venture of Siemens and Wood Group. Had a global responsibility across many years, and I started with Denata, as I described back in February of 2025, so just about 14 months ago. Now, I think the question was, how does this new world that is upon us have I embraced, if you will, or embracing it in this new company? So upon entering into the Denata, I've noticed how important it is for me to, first of all, learn the business and see how I can make an impact on that business. This is being basically the first real HR people oriented function, if you will, that they have established. Prior to that in the United States, they kind of handled HR, if you will, on a transactional basis, but never really thought of this in terms of strategy and of how does this function really impacts the business. So I'm unpacking this. So I have become obviously part of the C-suite, working collaboratively with the CEO and also with the corporate in Dubai. So that's a little bit unique for my role, because not only that I have to manage my own world here in the United States, but also I am part of this big global HR community that is really centered in Dubai. Not uncommon to me. I work for Siemens, same thing, headquartered in Germany, having a strong presence in the United States. So it's managing this global impact of what HR can and cannot do it here on our local platform. But at the same time, the team in Dubai is very open to hearing of what we do in the United States. And then I have been participating in some of the sessions. They're all related to what Christian said about AI. And our Dubai team is also looking to hear from me of what we do here to really help the entire global organization. So in various parts of our organization, I mentioned first thing the global the ground handling. For you, what you need to be thinking is when you arrive at the on an airplane to the airport, there's a lot of things logistically that happens around the plane, if you will. Obviously, part of our team is unloading the luggage, making sure that it goes to the right destination. And then also the other end, when we onboard people in the passenger services, you are experiencing somebody meeting with you, taking your luggage, checking your documentation. At the same time, you have a cabin crew that comes in and cleans the plane, making sure that it's safe as well. Maintenance team at the ground are taking care of de-icing or refueling, making sure everything is done for the plane. And then we have a customer who is the particular airline watching us, if you will. How are we doing it? Are we doing it safely? Are we doing this in the right way? Are we not damaging the aircraft, for example? It does happen occasionally. So we have deployed a lot of already AI tools into making sure that the safety, the maintenance, and the deployment of people is already in place. I'll give you a couple of ideas. You will not see it at the airport, but when you look closely, we already have a vision and eye that is already deployed. This is a a piece of equipment that basically watches all the things that happens around the plane. And this is really a computer vision AI. This is part of the AI. It's already deployed. It's happening in real time. It also helps us to see in real time what's happening with a particular aircraft. What are we doing to the aircraft? How our people are engaged or not engaged? How is equipment working as well? So these things already happen in the area of safety, for sure, and this is one of the things that's very important for us. The second element within what Donata and how we engage the AI is really the predictive analytics. We need to make sure that we have enough workforce on time at a given place and for a specific period of time. And with the aviation, specifically on the ground handling, the time is critical for us. This is part of our business. We have to turn things around on time. You don't want to be late. We want to make sure that our customers are happy as well, that they let the plane go on time. But it is also very demanding when it comes over to predict how much workforce do you want to have in what places. So we use the AI tools to help us to navigate through this. It's very challenging, but how many people need to go when? If there's something that happens unusual, that even brings another layer of complexity. It was very difficult for us to manage this, call it by human, through Excel spreadsheets and tools that we have. So we now have deployed the AI tools to help us to navigate, to think in advance. And I like your box, Christian, when you show this. Where are you going to be? Not necessarily what is the current status. So these tools actually right now already are helping us out for our future. How are we going to manage the turnaround, if you will? That's what we use in our vocabulary here in aviation.
See, I think this is such a great illustration of what's probably happening in most organizations. I mean, there's very few. I mean, I think it's more industry specific, but most organizations are investing in some level of AI investment or capability, I should say. And when you see those stats of tens of billions of dollars invested, 95% seeing they're not recognizing ROI. I want us to be very clear in how we should interpret that. If we look at Matthias's example, does not mean that AI is not being applied effectively. It means we're not capturing the materiality of how those interactions are creating more value. I had a conversation with a very large, well-known hospitality brand about 8 months ago. And we went deep into this conversation around how the HR function with finances help can start to create a linkage model beginning at the initiative or actually beginning at the business outcome and then backing back into the HR initiative. And we just happened to meet last week and at a similar conversation around this topic. And he was able to demonstrate to me that they went back and they just did an audit, that they didn't do any additional intervention. They didn't do any material changes to the existing strategy, but they were able to find over $20 million that could be attributed to the things that they were doing, which was mind blowing for them because it wasn't a matter of necessarily tweaking the strategy. It was a matter of putting the right infrastructure in place, looking at the interventions that were being done, partnering finance, IT, and HR in order to be able to capture that. To your point, Matthias, though, if we have that in place, it also informs where we invest in the future, what interventions we prioritize. And then your return starts to become much more intentional and much more exponential. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Matthias? Because you gave us some really good examples around safety and efficiency, if you will, in terms of how the business is operating. I know you're also doing some other stuff that is very specific to the HR function as well, which I know the audience would be very interested in hearing about.
Yeah, let me connect those two. So my business is really much a people business. As I mentioned about the workforce deployment, if you will, and if you know a little bit about aviation, the turnover in aviation is very high. Okay, so for me, the real challenge is to make sure that I have enough people, if you will, deployed to those the terminals, if you will, to turn things around. But for me, it's like, how do I know how many do I need and how do I use them the most efficiently, if you will? The group of people are centered around maybe one customer. Is if I know that they need 25 minutes, 30 minutes, like how would I know that if another plane comes in and a different place, can I take those folks as well and they can service another plane? So it is all workforce management, bringing people and make sure that people do show up on time, that they're doing their job, and then they go back safely home. Now, from my perspective, the challenge is like, how do I find, where do I find these people, make sure that they're available, and then they come on time. So the volume, the managing the workforce, it's critical for how am I to deliver into the business expectation. So for me, as I mentioned, the higher turnover is I turned into a company that actually was featured here in one of the sessions, the ACNET, and I believe Naraj is here on the call as well. I see his name here, and I said, I no longer have issue of finding people to work for me, but I have a challenge of finding the right people to make the right selection. So partnering with the ACNET, I am able to go and help to find people and to make the selection via the AI tool that they have developed, and making sure that the people I find, they're the right people, and then I can get them to the company quickly. I have a very small HR department, and it seems to be smaller and smaller. Every year we look at this. So I need to substitute this with a tool that helps me. So ACNET has developed and they if you remember, folks, they were presenting it to us, saying how they can immediately provide the interview, if you will. They're using AI at any point, at any time. I have 3 different time zones in the United States that I have to manage, and do it fast, do it quickly, and help the managers, if you will, to select the right people. So we would set up what are the expectations? What do we need to ask in the interview? The interview happen in real time with the candidate. It's really kind of human-like interview. The selection is being done, prioritization, what we want to know about the employees, as well as what's important for us. And then this selection happens in real time. So I don't have to wait for my recruiter come back and looking into this. We certainly would be able to narrow it down faster to the best selected candidates so the managers can make decisions of whom to hire. Now, this is not just my idea, it's the right thing to do. I had a conversation with our C-suite, the CEO, and he says, Matthias, go get it, because he sees this as something that's so critical in the environment and the industry that I'm in, that this would make a difference. We want it to be responding to the folks who are looking to join our company quickly. And then this allows me to do so. If I have about 4,000 hires a year, if you think about it, the quality, even if I have a small TA team, I am worrying about the quality of what I'm getting from them, because I am very mindful of the time constraints and how much volume do they need to process. I have starting to believe in a little more into the tool that helps me to be sure that the objectivity is being preserved, if you will, and I have a better selection process, if you will, and a faster selection process. So I'm happy to be part of the journey and with the future development maybe down the road. But that is where I see it. So I'm responding basically to the need of the business, saying we need to have the right people. We need to hire them faster, if you will, respond to them quickly, and learn about the company and also about them quicker, so I can then develop them later, if you will, for the future of the careers. So that is on the HR side of it. Besides the point, we have introduced HRIS. HRIS is not anything new, but and also what Christian said earlier is how do we combine that IT, the finance, the HR and human capital, so we actually do understand this part of our business, because I think there's still some areas that we could do better.
Absolutely. And you brought up a couple of points. And just pointing back to what I said earlier in terms of from a data and ethics perspective, from a compliant, how we have to be careful. And you brought up a really good example because it is one of the most commonly used use cases for AI and HR, and that is the process of recruiting, onboarding, selection. And I like to refer back to the EU has an AI package, a legal package that is being designed to not just provide guidance to organization, but effectively, eventually be able to govern how organizations deploy AI. And the area of recruiting, selection, and onboarding is listed as a very high risk area to apply AI. It does not mean don't apply AI in these functions because the use case that Matthias just shared is incredibly beneficial. But by high risk, what they're trying to tell us from an HR perspective is you need to have a human in the loop. You can't have AI managing a process from end to end. And this is an area where you need to have human intervention to ensure that there's fairness, that people are being taken care of, and so forth. So I just want to be able to kind of share the two things where we have to be innovative and we have to bring in technological advancement and ideas to how we redesign material processes, but we have to be able to do so in a very responsible way. The other point that I wanted to make, just going off of what you said, Matthias, is just highlighting the opportunity for you, all of you, to take a leading voice in your organization's conversations as it relates to these topics. Because the way that I see it is if you look at AI in general, look at our experience of AI is mostly shaped by our interactions with LLMs, which is okay. It doesn't represent all of how AI is deployed, but it is representative of the fact that for each and every one of us, whether we use Gemini, Claude, or ChatGPT, that tool is only as effective as I am in prompting it or eliciting its support. Does not have these magical qualities where it's automatically going to go in and just do the work all in and of itself. I buy a tool, I deploy it, and all of my problems are solved. The skill of the leadership team, and in this case, the HR function, in being able to prompt the understanding of what needs to be done downstream is going to determine the success of an organization. And that dynamic isn't going to change anytime soon. And I thought I'd unpack a quick use case to complement the ones that Matthias are sharing with us. A while ago, I was working with an education organization, very large. They provide education, and one of their biggest challenges, if you can imagine, in the world of education, is keeping and retaining teachers. And their biggest problem was 90-day retention. How do we keep them early on in that first year that we have them? Because it has a material impact on the experience of the students, which ultimately impacts every other facet of the organization. When we did this deep dive into the onboarding process, we brought in research-driven insights on what effective onboarding looks like. And it's actually shockingly simple. And it's the fact that when you study individuals that leave organizations early on in that first year, they overwhelmingly respond no to the question of, do you feel like you're a part of a team? If you don't feel like you're a part of a team, you're exponentially more likely to leave in that first year. If you respond saying, I feel like I'm a part of a team, you're exponentially more likely to stay in that first year. That's an on-off switch that we can control. When you look at the onboarding programs of most organizations, I might even dare to say some of yours, our focus is on how do I onboard an employee onto the organization? And that's just intuitively how we've always done it. But by incorporating research-driven insight, what we did with this organization, and we've done it with many others, is switch the onus. Instead of employing the employee to the organization, onboarding the employee to the organization, we onboard the employee onto a team. And we reevaluate the entire onboarding process around making sure that happens as quickly and effectively as possible. So then this AI company comes in and they're working with them independently on how to streamline all of their HR processes. And they come back and they deliver the bad news of we took your onboarding program and we took it from 20 human interventions and it's down to 6 now. And they delivered that very nervously on the ends of my work with them around onboarding because they thought this is going to entail, Matthias, you alluded to it, the reduction of HR staff. That means we need less people because now there's not 20, there's 6. That's a significant reduction. The reaction of this HR team was jubilance. Why? Because even with the insights that they delivered, they realized there were not enough humans to elevate that experience for another human being onboarded. When you reduce the 20 touch points down to 6, they actually now were able to implement the ideal model for an onboarding experience for a new hire. It not only did it not necessitate the reduction of staff, it actually enhanced HR's capability of addressing a key business challenge that could be materially measured. So I just want to get your reaction to that concept, Matthias, in terms of your role as a strategist inside of the organization, informing a lot of these AI use cases that are being deployed.
Yeah, and I think Christian, it seems to be that this is a new insight that you just shared with me because you are absolutely right. That for me it was like how do I bring those people to the organization, right? But it's challenging, and globally we have deployed one size fits all model, which we know that it you just told me basically it may not be really the most effective way. So while everybody is quite aware, who we are, where we are, and how much we're connected with the Emirates and so on. But how are they really embraced, if you will, at the location is a key. One thing that you mentioned, Christian, is and you had a hospitality. I have the same experience that my turnover is dramatic in the first 96 months and then a year. Once somebody is becoming a part of the team, 1 year later, 2 year, 3 year, my turnover is great. I mean, I have no problem. People don't leave, but they would leave the first 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, because that is probably a function of how well we onboarded, how they kind of felt to be part of the team. One of the things last year that we had a big focus globally was the sense of belonging. How do we feel that we are part of this organization? We know that once people, like you mentioned, once they do feel that they're part of the organization, they understand their impact, they know who they work with, who are they interacting on a day-to-day basis, if you will. That's what really makes the difference, and they do stay. So this is why those folks who I see in my data analytics would stay, it's only after they feel that they're part of the team. And that usually shows me only after year 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7, and so on. So the first piece is really the proper onboarding. So you challenge me, but I will tell you this: this is a new thing, and I really thought this. I said, that's interesting. How do we make this even better, if you will?
And it goes back to what I mentioned at the outset. I mean, we do know so much more about humans and how they react at work. But again, this has been nothing new for those of you that know me. My entire career has been focused on bypassing best practices, bypassing what HR processes typically look like, because if you are able to do it much more intentionally based off of what research shows creates better outcomes, you will end up needing less resources, less interventions, and creating a materially bigger outcome. The key thing here is, I want to be repetitive on purpose because I know that's how it sticks, is when you're able to connect it to the materiality of the financial impact that the organization cares about the most. In that example, it was perfect because you are tweaking something and not in a transformative way. We didn't have to blow up their entire onboarding process. We just had to tweak the onus of it and change the guidance that you were giving to managers and leaders and people involved in the process. But then what you were able to materially measure was significant when you look at their biggest KPI, if you will, as it relates to 90-day turnover. So when we look at that from that perspective, and by the way, we can do this around the way we measure engagement, the way that we manage leader development, the way that we measure performance and how that performance is tied to outcomes. We can do this across the entire HCM ecosystem. But again, it requires a different role for the HR leader. The HR leader can't be a process manager. They have to be a transformation agent that understands the nature of the business and knows how to be able to connect all of their resource and budgetary investments back to the bottom line of the organization. So I know we did have a question in the chat, Matthias, which is kind of in line with what I just said. I'm not sure how long ago you were able to implement some of these things, but have you already been able to see a material impact on retention or any other key KPIs since you put them in place?
Um, Not yet. I can't tell you that I do because right now at this point is it's more of a still a new thing, if you will, and I seem to be the function that carries on. Safety was number one. I think we did a lot of tremendous impact on safety. HR is next, and actually how the CEO put it, safety first, HR next. This is the reason why I'm actually have the role because they were looking for somebody who would be able to help them. So to tell you the truth, I haven't not gotten this feedback yet, but I'm absolutely open to get that and maybe share with you down the road. It's too early. I mean, that's kind of where I am. But what I have seen so far is very exciting, and the rest of the leadership is looking forward to see more of it because they know how important that is. So I have a lot of support from them, but they're looking at, hey, now this function is going to get the limelight, and how are they going to help us out managing workforce and aligning to what we have already put in place in the areas of operation and our efficiency there. So
Absolutely. And the thing is that I've noticed is when we've been talking, I mean, I used to mostly speak in front of HR audiences. Now, ironically enough, it's shifted to more of a business audience, like Cindy alluded to in the beginning. When I talk with business leaders, they all want to do the right thing. Every single CEO that I talk to tells me when we're over dinner and a couple of drinks, I don't want to lay people off. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to cut funding. CFOs will tell me in groups, I don't want to be the bad guy, but the math has to math, and I have a fiduciary duty to my business. So then that completely, like some of the examples I've given you, they work. I know they work. I know higher engagement leads to lower retention, leads to better quality of care, better customer experience, et cetera. We know that. But unless we can connect it to the bottom line, you're not going to get the investment and the buy-in from a business to be able to make it happen. And I like sharing use cases because the feedback I get from folks like yourselves is that that's what makes it crystallize in my mind. So I'll share with you another use case from healthcare. And in healthcare, this was I've been working with healthcare for a very long time. I see Timothy out there. We worked together a couple of years ago. It's been always a passion for me, and I've always been focused on caregivers. How do we take care of caregivers so caregivers can provide better quality of care? That's always been the ultimate focus, and we've done phenomenal work. And there's a lot of healthcare systems out there that have been able to demonstrate a big material impact on the ability to retain caregivers and their ability to deliver care. As I started meeting with more CFOs and CEOs, I found an entire new wrinkle to the conversation, which ultimately ties back to the caregiver dynamic. And that is the fact that a lot of healthcare systems, not all of them, particularly the large ones, they have different margins in the different types of care that they provide. So a big part of the business model, which is why there's been so much growth in the industry through acquisition and mergers, is being able to have a large enough system that can take your patient base that comes to you for critical care or traditional medical care, and then be able to have that patient base start to be referred to the higher margin types of services. That is a key economic lever that allows healthcare systems to not just survive, but become more profitable. So being able to spread the care that they provide across their lower margin services to their higher margin services. Boring stuff, not stuff that I was necessarily fully in tune with, but it is a material business reality. So how do you take someone that's coming in for your traditional care and then get them to go and do something that's completely unrelated to what they came in for, but wanting to do it under the same umbrella, under the same brand? It is all about the quality of their experience. And the quality of their experience is going to be dictated in a large part by the humans that they interact with and the engagement that they get from them. So then all of a sudden, not only if I can go and do the right thing and invest in the caregivers, but if I can prove the material impact that it's having on that key line of business, then all of a sudden HR has a ton more budget. HR has a lot more influence in being able to do the right thing for those caregivers so that they can show up and create more financial value. So I know we're coming up to 5 minutes, but I wanted to drop a couple of those use cases. My intention for today was frankly to maybe challenge you a little bit, but hopefully inspire you. You have the ability in your hands. You've been doing a lot of really good work for such a long time as a discipline. Matthias, you're such a great example of that. Now it's a matter of us being able to connect these dots and show the business world that we are the ones that have the answers to their biggest challenges right now.
Hey, Christian, there is a question from Tim Jurgensen. Tim, you want to come
Oh,
off mute and just ask it since you're part of this, you've been part of this group forever?
Sure, and Christian, you're certainly familiar with what we did in terms of reducing that nurse turnover at Covenant Health. We did that dramatically, and um, one of the things that we did was make sure that every nurse leader, actually we did it for all positions, but all managers had specific goals in terms of retention, and we made sure that our leaders understood how much it cost specifically financially to replace someone on their team. And we're talking about CFO proofed cost. So I guess my question was around, in terms of, I think accountability is critical because you can talk about all of this, but if you don't have and I think AI can help with this a lot, but making sure that you have formal accountability for certain things that HR related that impact the bottom line. Just one other something else that you said, when we reduced turnover, which dramatically, we saw a direct connection to dramatically raised patient satisfaction scores, which impacted our CMS reimbursements in the millions of dollars. Now, Covenant Health's a large system, but that's business results, pure and simple. And it inspired our whole organization to grab onto that and embed it into our culture. So I think if AI can help with that, that gives it a great business case to engage with it.
There's two parts to what you just mentioned. The latter part is we need to change the way what our voice sounds like inside of the executive team. The way that we speak, the way that we position our programs, it should all be through the lens of investment versus return, not cost, which is the way that we typically speak from an HR perspective. It's all about investment versus the return, and you will find a dramatic change in the way that your function is funded, the way that your standing and your executive team looks and feels like. And then in regards to your leadership question, it's a more complicated one, and I know we're almost at time, so I'll answer it very briefly. But the reality is, particularly in healthcare, and it's not unique to most industries, is that your leaders are not just leaders. They actually have a very big plate around the tasks that are being asked of them that are urgent in some cases because they literally have people's lives depending on their ability to execute the technical aspects of their job. So one of the things that we're seeing a lot right now is reducing capacity vis-a-vis AI functionality. So if it took somebody 40 hours to do something, now it takes 10. And then immediately what we're doing is we're figuring out how to fill those extra 10 hours that were created, that capacity either by layoffs or by adding more to their schedules, et cetera, et cetera. What we need to be able to do, and it's part of what you alluded to, Timothy, is being able to articulate the human aspect. You create that capacity so that they can be better leaders. And by being better leaders, they're going to have this material impact, which ultimately is going to not just be greater than the cost savings that you would make through the layoffs, but it would actually help you achieve those exponential margin increases that you're looking for. The challenge is basically doing a scavenger hunt to connect the downstream financial impact that these decisions are having. So the last thing I'll say on the topic, and this is really like I believe my mandate from the universe, is that if we're able to articulate the human capital value being created by humans at work, and I can prove that the $100,000 that are being invested in an employee are returning 2, 3, 4x, the conversation is quickly going to shift from laying off humans from their jobs to investing in humans to increase their capacity to create more value. And if we do that more effectively, we're going to need more humans, not less. Not in every industry, not in every use case, but that is in general what's going to happen. And as we start thinking about the transition of what's happening in our world, I firmly believe that that's really where we're going. And I want to play my part to be able to help those of you in those roles to be able to make that happen.
Okay, you guys, we're at time. Christian, amazing. Thank you, Matthias. And Tim, thanks for your additional comments. We appreciate it. See you guys next month. We appreciate you being here.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye bye.